Hi, first graders. I want to teach you today about breaking shapes into equal parts. So we are going to be taking circles and squares and rectangles and breaking them into equal parts. So we're going to learn some new vocabulary today, and we're going to see how these shapes can be broken apart. This is your first introduction to something called fractions, okay? And we're breaking things into parts. It's kind of like when you're going to learn about fractions, probably when you're in second grade. But this is your first introduction to fractions and breaking shapes into equal parts. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to go through some of these equal parts together. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to start with just some of the new vocabulary that you're going to learn when you're learning about this lesson. So equal, unequal, then we're going to learn about halves, quarters or fourths, and then what it means for whole. So the first word up here says equal. This means that parts of the shape are covering the same amount of space. So that means everything is equal. Kind of like when you're sharing something, when you're sharing a pie or a cake with some friends, you want to give everybody the same amount of cake and you want it to be fair, and that is like equal. We want everything to be equal, okay? So then the opposite of equal is unequal. And unequal means that the parts of the shape do not cover the same amount of space. They are not fair. That would be like if you're cutting up the pie, one person gets a really big piece and another person gets a teeny tiny little piece, and that is unequal. They are not the same amount of space that are being shared, okay? Halves, or you might hear this as half, but half or halves is when the shape or whatever the object is divided into two equal parts. So just like up here we learned about the word equal, so a half means that there's two parts that are equal, okay? Quarters and fourths means that the shape is divided into four parts. So instead of it being in two parts, like up here when it's a half, for quarters or fourths, you're dividing it into four parts. So that's easy to remember for fourths because it's the same word, for fourths. So we might just have to know this new word, quarters. So dividing it into quarters is four equal parts, okay? And then whole means it's the whole entire shape. So the whole cake, the whole pizza, or whatever it is. So these are just some screenshots that I took from your math workbook this week. So these are some of the things we would have seen if we had been in school together. So this is some shapes that they've divided, and they're showing you up here at the first part, they're showing you whole. The whole shape is colored in dark blue. This part's showing halves, half of it. Look at how there is two equal parts. This part is equal and this part is equal, okay? And then this part over here is into quarters or fourths because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 parts and they are all equal. If I had 4 friends over and this was a pizza, I would want to cut my pizza just like this so that everybody had an equal part of the pizza. Okay, so this is showing you can show equal parts sometimes in more than one way. If you have a sandwich, you can cut it up and down like this with a straight line, a vertical line, and it gives you two equal parts. Or sometimes when I make a grilled cheese, I like to cut it diagonal, and it actually gives me the same amount of grilled cheese on each side as it does over here. So there sometimes are ways to show an equal part in more than one way. Alrighty, and then this is an example of unequal parts. If I was sharing this sandwich with somebody and I cut my sandwich right here and I gave this part to my friend and I took this part for myself, they might not be very pleased because that's unequal. It is not fairly shared, so that is showing an unequal part. This part is way bigger. If you wanted it to equal, you would have had to cut it right down the middle like this or across diagonal like this. Okay, so circles, kind of the same thing as what we talked about. This is how we're cutting circles into parts. This is the whole pizza or the whole cake or the whole pie. Those are all things that I can think of that are circles that we cut into equal parts a lot of time because we're sharing those things with other people. Unless you're very hungry and you're eating the whole pizza by yourself. Halves means you're taking half of the whole. You're going half, my half, your half. These are two equal parts. This part is just the same amount of pizza as this side is. It is equal and it is halves. Okay, so 2 equal parts means half or halves. And then just like we saw on the last slide, this is quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 equal parts. So that would be a good way to share if you had like 4 friends over and you wanted to share your pizza or your pie and you wanted to put it into 4 equal parts. That's how you would want to share. So that's how you break circles into equal parts: whole, halves, quarters, or fourths. Now this is how you break squares into equal parts. So you can break squares into equal parts. You could have a whole of the sandwich like this. If you're hungry and you want to eat the whole sandwich, you'd eat the whole thing. That means the entire shape, okay? But if you decide to split the sandwich into 2 parts, you would be getting it into halves, like this: half, half. 2 halves equals a whole. So this is 2 equal parts cut down the middle, okay? And then if you want to break your shape even further, if you're breaking your sandwich down for 4 people, then you would cut it down the middle like you did before, and then you cut it across. And that shows you how you've broken that shape into 4 equal parts. You have to be careful when you're cutting, because if you remember on the last picture, they put their line down right about here, and that was not in the middle. So you have to do down the middle and then across the middle to create 4 equal parts. And that is fourths or quarters. And then this is how you can break rectangles into equal parts. So rectangles can be broken into equal parts just like circles and squares. This is a whole rectangle right here. This is a rectangle that has been broken into halves. So it has 2 equal parts, a long skinny at the top and a long skinny at the bottom. Or you could break your rectangle into fourths or quarters and just do your short lines down and breaking that rectangle into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. Okay, so that's how we can break rectangles into equal parts. For the next part, what I want to do is I want to break these shapes into parts with you. So we're going to start with squares. So I want to talk about how we can build squares with equal parts, and then we'll also do some, and I'll show you how they can be unequal. So I'm just going to insert a line here, and look at how this program that I'm using already shows me exactly where the middle is going to be here. So I'm going to follow those purple dots that it gives me, and I'm going to break this shape into equal parts. So now that my shape has 2 equal parts, that's called halves. So this one has been broken into halves. Okay, there's another way you can break things into halves though too. Just like we showed, you could start from your diagonal and go to the other corner diagonally, and you've broken your shape into equal parts this way. This is the same amount of sandwich as this is. Even though it looks a little bit different, it actually has been broken into 2 equal parts. Okay, so that's 2 different ways that you can break apart a square into equal parts. Now that's for halves. Let's talk about how you can break this into parts for quarters or fourths. So you could do just the way that I talked about before, where you do a line down the middle, and then you would need another line down the middle, or I'm sorry, a line across, connecting right where those purple dots are. That's very helpful because it makes sure that my square is being broken evenly and equally. So now I did 1 line down, and then I did my second line across. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was able to break that into quarters or fourths by separating it into those with those lines. Now, another way that you could break your square into equal parts, and this might not be as easy for me to tell, I'm going to take my best guess here, but I could try and make these into long and skinny lines, and just kind of separate this shape into quarters by putting long skinny lines, maybe something like that. Okay, so it might not be perfect, but that's my best guess about breaking this square into equal parts. So if this was a sandwich and I had 4 friends over, the amount of sandwich that a person is getting right here in this quarter is actually the same as what they would get over here. Even though it looks so different, it is actually the same amount of the shape that has been split into equal parts. okay? So that's how we can break apart some squares. Let's do a couple of circles. Now, circles don't have as many options as squares because you can't really do a circle. Let me get another line here. You can do, wow, look at all these purple dots that show up for this. Circles are most of the time cut into 8 slices. Like when you order a pizza, it typically comes to your house split into 8 slices. It just depends on the type of pizza or the size of the pizza. But let's just say I want to divide this pizza with 2 people. Okay, so right now I've got 1 slice for me, 1 slice for you. Those are equal parts. Those are called halves. But maybe another friend is coming over and I want to actually separate this pizza into 4 equal parts. I would cross it just like I did with the square. And this is fourths or quarters. And they've been split into equal parts. Okay. Now, one thing you cannot do with a circle that you can do with a square is I did like some of those long and skinny lines when I was doing fourths. But if I gave my friend a slice of pizza, let's see, if I separated it kind of like this, these are not equal parts. These are unequal. Look at the amount of space right here that this person is getting as their pizza slice, and then this teeny little part over here. That is not equal. So circles can only be broken into fourths or quarters by doing it across like this. Okay, you can't do it like we did with the square here where we did all these skinny lines up and down. Circles, you can't do that. You have to break it apart into quarters this way. Okay, so that's how you can break it into quarters. And then for a circle, like I said, you can break it into halves like this. And circles can be broken even further. But for this particular math lesson, we're just learning about halves and quarters. All right, and then the last one is parts of a rectangle. Very similar to a square. You can do the same thing. You can break it into halves like this. You can break it into quarters by going down and then putting another line directly across like this. Okay, so this is in halves, this is in quarters. You could do it like we did with the square, where you can try to do some skinnier lines down, and then you can add your lines in and try to make your equal parts this way. Trying my best there to make those look like equal parts. So that could be quarters right here. And then you could also do quarters by going this way, long and skinny this direction. And I'll try my best here to make these look as even and equal as possible because we want them to be equal. So those might not be completely equal, but that's my best guess, oopsies, about making these look all equal and separating that rectangle into equal parts this way. So this amount of space is the same as this amount of space and this amount of space. Those are all 1/4. They are all exactly the same amount as this other one here, here, or here, okay? So those are just some examples of how shapes can be broken into parts. So remember that you can have whole or halves or quarters, and we want to make equal parts. Sometimes you might hear of the word unequal when the shape is not split equally, okay? So I hope you guys have a great day and you have some pages in your learning packet about equal and unequal parts that can help you understand this a bit more. Bye.